a bit deeper in today we will dig a bit deeper in the statistics training. We will look at the key concepts for the different energy products. We will look at oil, coal, natural gas, renewable, and electricity statistics. Before, so this is the agenda for the whole training. So today we are looking at the webinar 2 of statistics by commodity, and we will be together for the next 2 hours. And again, a very quick housekeeping rule to make the session today the most effective. So the entire webinar will take place in virtual mode. If you have any urgent clarification, we recommend that you use the Q&A box in priority, and you can also raise your hand, but it's easier for us with the Q&A box. And if you have any additional questions, you can still write to me, to Arnaud, or to the Africa program email address. So just to start looking a bit at the overall perspective of energy sources in different regions. So if we look at the OECD region, we see that around 80% of the energy supply mix, it's made of fossil fuels. But if we move to Africa, we see that it is only 50%, and biofuels and waste, it accounts for a much bigger share of nearly 50%, given hydro, nuclear, and solar, etc. It's minimal. Now, when we look at Sub-Saharan Africa, the share of biofuels, it increased even more, and it's 70%. And in Nigeria, it is even bigger and accounts for 70%, 75% of the energy mix. So in Nigeria, the importance of biofuels in the energy mix is very high. Now let's see again very quickly how data are collected and when and where they come from. So what are the sources for data? So for supply and transformation data, most of the data come from energy industries, producers, or from importers and exporters through survey or administrative data. For demand data, we usually collect the energy consumers data through end-use surveys for household and enterprises. And for the integrated approach, we use existing surveys, direct measurement, estimations, and modeling. Let's now do some quick interactive questions using Menti. And so please connect to www.menti.com, and I will share the screen for Menti now. So please connect to www.menti.com and use the code that appears up. So 52, 34, 16, and 7. So please connect to Menti and use the code 5234167. I'll give you some time to connect. Yesterday we had a high participation for Menti, so this is really good. I hope that today as well you will all participate. So the first question is, how imports of biofuels, of combustible fuels are taken into account in energy statistics? How would you report imports of combustible fuels? Is it every time that a product enters a country, even if just only in transit, it is considered as import? Do you report only imports by country of final destination? Or also import statistics are based on future contracts of energy commodities? So all these notions we will look at in the presentation. We will look into details how to report imports and exports of products. But here we just wanted to check if you already knew a bit about what to take into account and what not to include in the energy statistics. So think again, do you include all the imports every time a product enters a country, even if it's just for transit? Or do you take only the amount of imports by country of final destination? So we have 21 people who have replied and 12 think that we only report it by country of final destination. 6 participants said we should also include transit. And here we are talking about combustible fuels. And 3 that replied we should also base it on future contract of energy commodities. So we have 23 participants who have replied. Yesterday we were around 40 replying. So please, those who have not yet connected to menti.com, please do so and use the code that appears up to reply to the question. Okay, let's see the right answer. The right answer is you should only report imports are taken into account only by the country of final destination. I'm not going to say a lot here because during the presentation, Nicola discussed this in more details, but we do not include transit for imports of combustible fuels. And for future contracts, as this has not yet started, we don't include it in historical energy statistics. Next question. What can we consider as refinery inputs? What are refinery inputs? Is it only crude oil or crude oil and natural gas liquids? Or is it crude oil, natural gas liquids, and other products of fossil and bio origins? So what do we consider as refinery inputs? What can you put in a refinery to produce oil products? Waiting for participants to reply. What do we put in a refinery? So the majority of you think that in a refinery, we consider as refinery inputs crude oil, natural gas liquids, and also other products of fossil and bio origins. And indeed, that's the right answer. It's not only crude oil or crude oil and NGL, but we also include other products of fossil and bio origin. Next question. What are natural gas liquids? Is it the same as liquefied natural gas? So NGLs are natural gas in a different form? Is it a waste product extracted during natural gas purification and of no value? Is it a mix of gases different from natural gas and more similar to oil products? Or is it something else? What are natural gas liquids, NGLs? So many people are hesitating between same as liquefied natural gas, and some are saying it's a mix of gases different from natural gas and more similar to oil products. So the right answer here, it's natural gas liquids. It's a mix of gases different from natural gas and more similar to oil products. And in the IEA questionnaires, it's reported in the oil questionnaire. And indeed, it's different from LNG. LNG, it's natural gas in a liquefied form, and it's all reported in the natural gas questionnaire. So NGL, it's more related to oil. So this one we'll keep it for after, and we'll now start the presentation.
This presentation will be in 5 parts for each of the main classification of our energy commodities. And for each of those parts, we will see first the key trends, then the key concepts, and finally, some key points for data reporting. And this will be done for primary and secondary oil products, natural gas, coal and coal products. Although for this part, we will go quickly since coal is not energy commodity used a lot on the African continent. And then we'll discuss renewables and electricity. So let's start by discussing some primary and secondary oil products energy statistics. So first of all, let's have a look at the crude oil production by countries. And this production is dominated by 10 major producers who represent more than 70% of the global demand. And among those 10, we have 3 key actors that represent a third of this demand. So an energy landscape in that situation that is far from equally reparted around the globe. Here we are talking about crude oil, but this is not the only part of these categories. We also discuss about refined oil products, secondary oil products. So if we have a look now at the world refinery intakes, we can see that although OECD OECD refinery intakes, stayed more or less stable in times, we have an important growth of refinery activities in several non-OECD regions, such as China, Asia, Middle East. This growth shows a growth in the oil demand in those countries, of the need for the population of specific oil products. And as we can see on the right, China and all of the other non-OECD regions grew in terms of oil demand in those countries. It is not that visible on this graph on the right, but Africa also knew in the last decade an important growth in its oil demand. So let's have a closer look. In these graphs, you can see pretty clearly that transport has been the sector that drove the most oil demand in Africa for the last 30 years. Road transportations has grew a lot in those last decades, and hence the demand for oil products. But it's not only that. We have also growth in aviation fuel due to increased air traffic, and also some marine fuel demand that grew due to the increased activity in several ports and port terminals in Africa. Do not forget that transport might be the biggest one, but we have all of those sectors that grew also in terms of demand, such as industries in a lesser way, residential, and non-energy use, which is still in a minor in Africa, while it represented a high share of demand now in OECD countries. So now that we discussed some key trends, let's have a look at how we classify our products, those products in our methodology. So we try to distinguish between the products that feed the refinery and the product that comes out of the refinery. So primary oil products, which are coming from natural resources, and finished secondary oil products, which are manufactured in the refinery. This is a rough definitions, of course, because we have some of the output of the refinery that will be used later on as input of refinery. So this will get a little bit more complex later on. Just remember that those products can be classified in many ways. Also for the finished secondary oil products, due to the fact that they are sold products, the name most of the time comes with a specific set of physical properties. Please, if you have doubts on how to report a specific product, do not hesitate to refer to the IRES, so the International Recommendation for Energy Statistics from the United Nations. This is the methodology that we are following at the IEA and that is followed by most of the international organizations. So to discuss it a bit more in detail, in primary oil products, you will find crude oil and natural gas liquids, for example, coming from oil wells or natural gas fields. But you can also find some synthetic crude oil, which we'll discuss a little bit later, and some secondary products as inputs to the refinery, additives and feedstocks, for example. On the other end of the refinery, we will see first of all, some gases, some refinery gases that are part of the process, and then all of the products that we can find on the market today, such as naphtha, gasoline, diesel, fuel oil, lubricants, bitumen. And in our statistics, we try to focus on the products the quantity of those products that will be used for energy uses, of course. So now let's have a look at how we could represent the chain of flows for each product. So let's first, the primary oil products. The refinery intake is mostly crude oil, but as I told you before, it can also include some other primary and unfinished secondary oil products. But let's keep it simple for now. We focus on the indigenous production of crude oil and some other sources for natural gas liquids, for examples. One note here, we focus in our methodologies on marketable productions, onshore or offshore, but marketable production coming from within the border of a country. If it's coming from another country, it will be reported as trade, so imports or exports. Then we can have also some stocks, some crude oil that have been kept in waiting for the demand to be used in the refinery. And then we have other flows of consumptions and supply, such as the direct use of primary products. Crude oil can be sometimes used, for example, to generate electricity. And we have some byproducts and finished products that are transferred to be used as input to the refinery. Just a note on the byproducts here, it represents the feedbacks from the petrochemical industries. We will not detail more here, but this is a part of the oil statistics that can be kind of complicated if we look in a more closer way. So now on the other end of the refinery, we have our refinery that will provide the gross inland deliveries of secondary oil products. But to sustain its activity, most of the time, the refinery burns some of its own production. So refinery fuels will be consumed within the refinery to sustain its own activity. Then we have the refinery gross output, so the outputs of, let's say, motor gasoline or diesel from the refinery, which will be part of the gross inland delivery, and the primary product receipts. So, for example, as I said before, the crude oil that will be used to be burned in a power plant to generate electricity. We can have then some products, so products transferred to be used as primary oil products in the previous slide, and inter-product transfers. Those transfers will be, for example, some specific refined oil products that will be used as another product with another other properties. Then, of course, we can have some trades of those products, so import and export from outside of the countries, and international bunkers. So here we report all of the fuel consumptions for airplanes or maritime ways that concerns trips that originated or are going outside of the countries, that are not staying from within the country. And again, we can have here also some stocks of those products for safety reasons, for commercial reasons, for many possible reasons. The gross inventories will be provided for energy sector use, for transformations, and for final and non-energy consumptions. Now, let's have a look at a complete oil data sets to highlight some important trades for Sub-Saharan Africa. So, in Sub-Saharan Africa, in general, we can find countries that produce a lot of primary oil products, so crude oil, NGL, etc. So, the production that is there. But since the capacities, the activities of refinery is very low in Sub-Saharan Africa, we have very few importations of those primary oil, and a vast majority that is exported toward other countries that will who will do the activity of refined those primary products. So this high level of export that I told you shows the lack of capacities in refining. And then if we have a look at the oil products, we can see that the countries are mostly dependent on the importations of the secondary oil products to provide the demand of the population for mostly transportation here. As I told you, the refining capacity do not cover the regional demands. Hence, the reliance on imports that we can immediately see with our statistics. So, if we have a look on how we can try to check our data and make sure our data makes sense, one of the main things that we are paying attention to is the transformation efficiencies. The transformation efficiencies. When you take any transformations, here we'll be focusing on refinery, we check the outputs and the intakes of the refinery. Those are the two main elements that we have in terms of data. So we take these intakes and these outputs, and we try to see if the losses that occur during the transformations made sense or not, if the value of the losses that we see. Attention here, we speak about refinery losses when the intake is superior to the output, and refinery gains when the intake is inferior to the output. And we calculate the yield of this refinery by doing some simple calculation. We divide the output of total secondary products by the intake of total primary products, and we put it in as a percentage. So we say that there are losses in the refinery if the yield is below 100%, and gains if it's above 100%. Of course, here, if you do this calculation, you need to have everything at the same units, and units matters in this case. Because in mass units, you would expect some small losses and no gains at all. You do not create mass during such transformations. In energy units, it's the same. Due to evaporations, you would lose in total a little bit of the carbon content, so of the energy contained in those products. But in volumes units, if you calculate, for example, in liters or cubic meters, you would expect some slight gains because the products, the secondary oil products that you are creating in your refinery are lighter and occupy more volumes at the end of the refinery process. Now, if we discuss about the final consumption of those oil products, as I told you, those products have specific properties, specific physical and chemical properties, and for this reason, we expect them to have a specific use, a specific final consumption sectors in which we expect them to be. Of course, there can be exceptions in some countries, in some cases, but those, in that case, needs to be documented and explained in your statistics. So here are some examples. Crude oil, as I told you, can be used in electricity plants, but you have also fuel oil and diesel that are most of the time used for this. In aviation, you would expect jet kerosene or aviation gasoline. Transportation, of course, we would expect gasoline, diesel, LPG, and etc. You can see here some main uses, maybe 1 point on non-energy uses. This part we still record it for accountability, and bitumen is mostly used, for example, in the creations of roads. This is the last part. This is the end for our discussion on oil products. Now let's talk about natural gas, and let's start with some key trends on these products. So, natural gas, as now, is the fossil fuels that grew the most in the last decades. Its largest producers are now USA and Russia. And its demand grew almost tripled since 1973, and it's mostly due to for its large demand in heat and power productions. Its trade is both in gaseous form through pipelines and in LNG forms, so liquefied forms through tankers, which explain partially its big increase in demand in the latest years because of its ease now to transport this commodity around the world. But it's not the only reason. The main reason is that natural gas is the fossil fuels that emit the less CO2 per unit burned. It's around 60% of coal, for example, which explains its interest for many countries to use this fossil fuel to reduce their carbon footprint while doing their green energy transitions. And as I told you, the dominance of pipeline trade has been decreasing since the emergence of liquefying technologies, which help bring this fossil fuel into other countries. Now, let's have a look at Africa situations. So, global demand for gas doubled since 1990, but in the case of Africa, it almost quadrupled in the same period. It still represents only 4% of the global demand, but still the growth is very impressive when we see it. This growth, as for any countries, is mostly grew by electricity demand. We'll see it right now. So this is a chart that presents the demand driving sectors for natural gas in various regions. So OECD, non-OECD, we can see that in any case, power and heat generations are on top of the driving sectors, but there are already a distinction between OECD and non-OECD regarding the demand in residential sectors, as many office and buildings in OECD are now hit by natural gas when it's less common in non-OECD countries. If we have a look at Africa and more specifically Sub-Saharan Africa, we can see that this trend is becoming more and more visible, with Africa as the global consuming 60% of its natural gas for power and heat generation, and even more for Sub-Saharan Africa. So our methodology to collect the data with the IEA in our methodology tries to cover all stages of its supply side. So firstly, we focus on the production of natural gas. Again, we talked about this in a few slides, but we focus on the domestic and marketable production here and received from other sources. This can be gases from an oil field or some gases coming from a coal mine, for example. Natural gas is mainly produced by extracting a mixture of methane from the underground deposits and also a small share of gas blended into the natural gas grid that come from oil, coal, or renewables. We also cover in our methodology the infrastructure that connect productions with consumptions. So this includes the transmission pipeline systems, the distribution systems, and some LNG, the LNG terminals in the country. Finally, at the end of the chain, natural gas is consumed in different sectors, such as the heat and electricity generation in power plants, or water and space heating for production in the residential and commercial sectors. Another very important part of the supply chain is the trade. Natural gas can be imported and exported through pipeline and liquefied, or liquefied. Now, the arrow that appears represents the interaction of the flow with the infrastructures. All the natural gas produced or imported by pipelines are mixed in the transmission systems, and the imports of LNG are regasified and then mixed. Some big power plants may be located right next to an LNG terminal and sourced directly from the regasification process. From the transmission system, it goes to the distribution network, which has a lower pressure. Most of the small and medium natural gas consumers are connected to this grid, which explains the importance for us to have a clear and precise data collections on the trade of natural gas, to know which part has been imported as LNG or as gas through pipelines. Now, let's discuss again on the production of natural gas. As a reminder, in our methodology, we measure the productions once the products are in marketable states. This is once we have subtracted all the impurities and subtracted the quantities of natural gas flared or re-injected. Re-injected quantities often occur in an oil field with associated natural gas. They are re-injected to favorize more commercializable products and to keep the pressure within the field. Also, keeping track of re-injected quantities is not mandatory. We encourage countries to keep track of those values, and especially of the flared gas, which are important for the CO2 accountability of a country. They represent a large part of CO2 emissions in the atmosphere. So we have here an extraction point. It can be an oil field, a gas field, a coal mine, and from it we have the gross productions. This gross productions, part of it will be flared, as I told you, or re-injected, and then the rest goes through the natural gas processing, in which we extract the impurities, so sulfur and other elements, and also natural gas liquids, NGLs, that will be found later in our oil statistics. Please refer to the previous part. And out of this processing, we will have the marketed productions of associated gas, non-associated gas, collier gas, and this is the reported quantity on which we focus later on in our statistics. Again, in any statistics work, the units and physical, and especially here, the physical conditions in which the measure is made are important. Natural gas being a gas, the pressure and temperature at which you are doing the measure of volumes will impact the result of your measure, and it's important that those points are made in a clear in your data sets. As I told you before, regarding natural gas reporting, most of the difficulties comes actually from the trade data. Import should cover gas entering your countries for domestic consumption and reported under the country where the gas was produced. So import, for example, from Nigeria would be classified in such way. Export should be domestically produced, so before N, the unused quantity leaving the country should be reported under exports. To say it in another way, we focus on the ultimate origin or destinations of the gas, and we do not include in our data statistics the transit and re-export of natural gas. Now, if we talk a little bit about transformations, natural gas can be used in several ways to be transformed into another energy form. So the most obvious is the electricity and or heat plants, so to produce electricity and heat. But it can also be used in some coal processes mixed with other elements in coke ovens, blast furnaces, or gas works plants to generate several gases that will be burned to sustain the activities of those industrial activities. And finally, it can be used in a gas to liquid plants to generate some synthetic oil products. We will not go too much in depth here, but keep in mind that this exists and could be reported in some of the data you encounter. So now we are done with natural gas and we will move on toward coal statistics. Now we will talk briefly about coal and coal products. Regarding coals, the key trends are, of course, located in Asia with China and India. China is the world's largest producer of coal, followed closely by India, and those two countries use a large part of coal because of its abundance, cheap cost, and low technology barriers that allow a quick generation of electricity and support for industrial activities, such as iron and steel productions and cement manufacturers, for example. Coal has some environmental concern linked to those activities because it is the largest CO2 emissions per unit of energy burned among conventional fuel. But it's not that of fuel from the past because it has some development possibilities such as carbon capture and storage, and could still have some years in the future of being consumed. Now, if we have a look at the classification in our methodology, there are several ways, because of historical and scientific reasons, of classifying coal. In our methodology, we try to do it by quality of the coal. So you would have here hard coal or brown coal, describing their physical aspect. And from that, we will have distinction between coking coal and flaccite, over bituminous coal and subbituminous coal, and lignite. The distinction being made with their calorific value, the amount of energy that they contained, and the amount of carbon within their physical constituents. Another way to distinguish is to see through their usage. For example, coking coal sometimes referred as metallurgical coal because it's used mostly in iron and steel industries, and anthracite and bituminous coal will be used mostly in electricity and heat generations or residential smaller activities, and will be referred as steam coal because of its use in generators. Lignite, it's still usually excluded from this kind of classifications. One important element here to keep in mind when you talk about the coal statistics are that calorific value may vary depending on the flows you are checking in your statistics. For example, the calorific value in your productions might not be the same as the one used in your consumption in electricity and heat generations because of selection of specific coal quality for specific consumption and the mix with the trade of those products. So if we check now those 5 types of coal that we discussed in the previous slide are what we call also primary coal. So fossil fuel extracted from a mine and made of carbonized vegetal matters under the form of a rock. But it is not the only the only product that we cover in coal. We have also derived fuel, such as we had secondary oil products, we can have some derived solid products from activities such as coal tar, coke coke, or patent fuels, and also some manufactured gases that are the outputs, some of the outputs of activities in metallurgical, in the metallurgical sectors, for example. As I told you before, the weighted average for calorific values are important to be made when you are working on coal because of the real variation you can encounter depending on the source of the coal you are checking right now. So here is a little example of a calculation in a country that use a mix of calorific value of coal coming from 3 other countries. And if we do the calculation of the weighted average, so as a reminder, you multiply the calorific value by the quantity, the respective quantity consumed, and you sum those elements and divide them by the total quantity consumed, you obtain the average net calorific value that you will be used for your total coal consumptions reported in your energy statistics. This can apply, of course, to any other energy commodities that you will be using in your datasets. One last part on calorific value. As I told you, we expect it to vary depending on the flows of consumptions, but of course, it is not the only way. We do not expect it to vary in a crazy, very large way. We expect for each product the calorific value to be within specific range of value. So for example, cooking coal, we expect it between 25,000 and 33,000 kilojoules per kilograms. And also, depending on which products, we would expect the variation between the NCV and the JCV to be around 5 or 10%. So this slide is available right now, so please don't hesitate to refer to it if you have doubts on the value you obtained for specific product that you would encounter. The coal balance, when we present it, is actually the easiest to represent in terms of difference between the supply and the demand. So supply, we have the domestic production from various sources, trade and stocks variations, and all those elements represent the supply of coal. And on the demand, you will have the transformations, we see that just after, the energy industry on use, and the total final consumptions. Don't forget that due to the way coal is transported, most of the time by trucks, there can be losses that are important. So don't forget to keep track of those distribution losses to keep your statistics in a good way. Coal balance, so we told, as I told you, we talked now about, and finally about transformations. It's actually the same almost setup as for natural gas. So you would have coal to consume in electricity and heat plants to generate those two energy commodities. And then you would have the consumption of coal within various industries such as coke ovens to create coke oven coke. Those products being used in blast furnace for metallurgical activities. And finally, you can have some coal used in gas works to generate gas workers and gas coke. One last part, again, this is in Africa only used in South Africa, but good to remember about it. You can use coke oven coke in liquefaction plants to generate some synthetic oil products. So not used in many countries, but still good to keep that in mind. If you see the term of synthetic crude oil, it can be coming from coal products. This is all that we will cover in coal for Africa. And now with
I think it's a good time to make a pause and take on some questions. So if you have any questions on what we just saw on oil, natural gas, and coal, please write it down in the Q&A box. And we have Nicolas Cohen, who is an expert on energy statistics, especially for African countries with us, and he can help answer some questions. No question? Don't hesitate to send us your questions. If there's no questions, then maybe we can continue, and you can still send us questions as it comes to your mind. Don't hesitate anytime to write it down in the question and answer box, and we can answer. So someone sent a question: is calorific value similar to energy density?
So I'm not sure what you mean by energy. Calorific value is it's the energy content that you would have in a fuel. So it's the amount of energy you can release by burning this specific fuel. Energy density, not sure what you mean by that. I didn't really saw this term used before, so I don't think it's the same thing. Pretty sure. And we had a question from Frideona. So, do we still encourage coal considering the high CO2 level? Well, most of international organizations and ecological organizations do not encourage coal because of its high carbon footprints, of course. But the thing is, in many countries, it is still a cheap way to get electricity, a far cheaper way and technically available way to quickly build a power plant and generate the electricity from that. So there are several countries that are still now investing and opening new coal plants. And there were some technologies sold by the US also regarding what they call the clean coal technologies, but in fact, those are just ways to try to capture part of the CO2 emissions directly at the exit of the power plant, but those are like small parts of the overall CO2 emissions, so not that. Okay, so I see you added a part. So as the world is turning to clean energy without much impact on climate. Well, actually, there is already an impact. In the case of the OECD countries, we saw that the amount of CO2 emissions reduced drastically in the latest years because of the switch from combustible fuels toward renewable electricity. The main concern is that there are many countries, many developing economy right now, with more and more, with the population growing, so an energy demand growing, that are in need, that have a demand of energy that is more really important and that is growing quickly. So the issue is more on the quickly available energy sources on that case. So will it be correct to say that that coal is the largest contributor to carbon emissions? Yeah, definitely. Definitely the largest, emitter. Right? Specifically, for example, in the case of Asia, well, of course, China is a big coal emitter, but not only this country, several countries in the area are burning a lot of coal, and this is big. This has a big impact right now. But I think China just recently signed an engagement to reduce coal and to reach its peak of emission by 2030, if I remember correctly, and to reach zero to 2015. I think they just signed an engagement for this. So people are still doing it, but at least they're realizing that it should be changed. So this is a good way.
So there's no so if we don't have any more questions, we'll just continue. So now we will do some more Menti question. We'll continue with this. So let me share again my Menti slides. So can you please connect to www.menti.com and use the code 52, 34, 16, and 7. So it's the same as before today. So I'll give you some time to connect. And the first question is, what is the renewable energy source that witnessed the highest growth since 1990? So in the world, what is the renewable source that has witnessed the highest growth since 1990? So the majority of you think it's solar photovoltaic. So we have answers getting in. Most of you think that it is solar PV. Let me see if we have some more questions. So I think it's clear that most of you think that it is solar PV, and let's see the right answer. It's indeed solar PV, the renewable energy source that witnessed the highest growth since 1990. So from an energy perspective, what are the other uses of wood beside charcoal? Sorry. So from an energy statistics point of view, what are the other uses of wood beside charcoal production? Is it as raw material for the production of furnitures, as a combustible for cooking and space heating, or none of those? So here what's important is from an energy statistics point of view, where is wood? How would you consume wood? So very good. Most of you said as a combustible for cooking and space heating. We have 3 participants who replied as a raw material for the production of furnitures, and for energy statistics, we include only the amount of wood that is used for energy purposes, and the making of furniture is not to be reported in energy statistics. So the right answer is indeed as a combustible for cooking and space heating. Another question, which sector consumes the most electricity globally? Is it the residential sector, the industry, services, or transport sector? Which one of those consumes the most electricity globally? So we have 20 participants that said industry, 3 that replied transport. Let's look at the right answer, and sorry. And the right answer for globally, it's the industry sector that consumes the most electricity. But in Africa, which sector consumes the most electricity in Sub-Saharan Africa? Is it still industry, or is it residential, or is it services? Is it transport? Do you think that it's the same as global? So here it's a bit more mixed, but still we have 13 people who replied residential, 7 that said industry, 5 that think that it is transport. So the right answer for Sub-Saharan Africa is it's the residential sector that consumes the most electricity. And I think that was the last Menti question, and now we will move on with to continue the presentation.
Turn to Renewables Statistics. So now we will talk about renewables in our energy statistics. So when we talk about renewables, for example, here in the total energy supply, we can see that it represents global a little bit less than 40% of the total energy supply in the world. When we say renewables, this includes hydroelectricity and solar, wind, geothermal energy, and also biofuel and waste, which represent a large part of those renewables present within the total energy supply. If we look in more detail, we can see that almost 2/3 of renewables in our statistics are made of those biofuel and waste, and more specifically of solid biofuel and charcoal. Hydro represents the first element of electricity generations from renewable sources in our statistics. And it is present in a large part in the world electricity productions, which represent almost 15% of the electricity generated in the world. Renewable sources are the energy communities that have the largest and most important growth rates in the world. Between 1990 and 2018, solar PV gained 36.5% in productions, followed by wind, biogas, solar thermal, and liquid biofuels, which led to the total renewables to grow of 2%, which is more than the global total energy supply growth in the same period. Now we focus a little bit more on the biofuels part, which are, as we said before, important in Africa. So here is a reminder of the previous slide we showed before. So in Sub-Saharan Africa, around 75% of total energy consumption is made of biofuel and mostly traditional biomass. This has implications on health, on social life, and also on the environment of those countries because of deforestation and maintenance of the area for the populations. And if we have a look, we can see that this on those primary on those biofuels, a large part, 93%, is made of primary solid biofuel, and a lesser part, around 7%, of charcoal. Now it's time for us to dive a little bit deeper on how we classify renewables, because for now we have talked about a lot of different products. Renewables and waste can be classified into 4 different groups. The first one will be the renewable electricity, renewable energy, which have primary energy form of only electricity. This includes, of course, hydro, wind, tide, wave, and ocean electricity generation, and solar photovoltaic or solar PV. So in here, the first point of measurement for the statistics is the electricity produced from those plants and structures. The second part will be the renewable energy, which can produce both heat and electricity, which have a primary energy form of heat. This is composed of geothermal and solar thermal. And in that case, the first point of measurement would be the heat created by the geothermal plant or the solar thermal panel. And then from this, we will see the electricity generated. The third part will be the combustible fuels, which can be stocks or trade. So those are industrial waste, municipal waste, solid biofuel, biogases, and liquid biofuels. So they are treated such as, in the case of fossil fuel, let's say coal, for example, or oil products. So their quantities, their mass being used as a unit of measurement. And lastly, there is a non-combustible heat-only group which contain only heat pumps. This will not be covered in too much deeply in here because it's not that present on the African continent. So now let's see about solid biofuels to dive a little bit deeper on those important elements in Africa. We focus, as a reminder, for solid biofuel only on the fuel produced for energy purpose. So it is a small part of the total, for example, wood that will be cut in a year. We also do the distinctions between primary and secondary fuel following what is recommended in the IRS. So primary production is the capture or extraction of the fuel of an energy form from natural energy flows from the biospheres, and those only include the commerciable, marketable productions. The secondary production is the manufacture of energy production through the process of transformations of other fuel or energy, whether primary or secondary. So now that this distinction is made, let's see example of solid biofuel that we can encounter. So you would have bagasse, which are a byproduct of the sugar industry, and same for other agronomic industries, you could have rice husk, olive cake, industrial wastes in a renewable form, for example, the natural rubbers. You have then wood pellets and animal waste, black liquor that is a byproducts of paper industries, and of course wood and woody materials, so firewood, wood chips, sawdust, etc. And finally, one element in which we will dive a little bit deeper, charcoal, which is a product produced from wood products at the origin. So if we follow the biofuel transformation for charcoal productions, unlike the other transformation of combustible fuels, the transformation of wood to charcoal is covered by many international organizations to really dive and try to know more about it. The production of charcoal is an output of a transformation process where wood is considered the input. The losses from this are included in the transformation sectors and are checked by calculating the efficiency of the process. Hence, the importance to have some net calorific value for wood and for the charcoal produced so that we can have a clear view on the efficiency of these transformations. So, as before, we can see that wood is an input into the charcoal kiln. So here you have two examples of kiln that can be found in the world. And the output is the charcoal. So important facts about the charcoal production. The efficiency, of course, is the input divided by the output divided by the input. In energy units, we focus here on the energy content. So the reference NCV of charcoal that we use in our statistics is 30,800 kilojoule per kilograms. And the charcoal kiln efficiency that we usually expect is between 10 to 40%. Actually, in reality, we see efficiencies in our data set that goes from 20 to 70%. And this is an ongoing work to try to improve the data collection on those transformations so that we can have more sensible data in the end. Now we will see about the electricity statistics. So first of all, let's see some electricity trends. And what can be said about electricity demand and of course then production has grown a lot in the last 20 years, mostly due to the increased level of incomes from various regions such as Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa. So the global production in 2018 was more than 26,000 terawatt hours, which is equivalent of 4.5 million wind turbines in the world. And Sub-Saharan Africa witnessed a threefold increase faster than the rest of the African continent. So we can see that electricity can be generated from various other sources, such as solar, hydro, nuclear, or fossil fuel, gas, oil, and coal. If we look at the share of each of those sources for electricity generation, we can see that depending on the region you are looking at, the origin of electricity will be really different. For example, in the case of OECD, it's more or less spread between coal, gas, and nuclear. And in Sub-Saharan Africa, for example, we see that hydro represents a large majority of the generations, followed closely by gas. Electricity generation mix is highly dependent on the most available and cheapest sources, as well as political choices and incentives in a determined country or regions. So if we look, for example, at the difference between the share of solar generations in OECD or in Sub-Saharan Africa, we can see here difference in terms of access to the technologies and political decisions made in various countries. Now, here are examples of those electricity mix in different countries in Sub-Saharan Africa. And obviously, it's really dependent on the political choices of one country and the availability within the border of the country. So now let's have a closer look at the electricity consumption by sectors to see where it is mostly consumed. In non-OECD countries in general, it's mostly consumed in industries. This is mostly due to the preeminence of China and India data within those countries. But in Sub-Saharan Africa and Sub-Saharan Africa, we see that this share is mostly, this first place is mostly occupied by residential and in a lesser way by industries in terms of consumptions. So now let's have a look at residential electricity demand, since it was that important in the previous slide. So the increase in wealth drives higher consumption per capita and then allows more people to have access to electricity in those countries. And this is a feedback loop. The more access led to an increase in wealth, etc., etc. So we can see in several countries between 2010 and 2019, for example, here we can see Ethiopia, but with the access growing for the population, we have an increase of the GDP within the country. So both elements are connected in our data sets. Now let's talk a little bit more about the data themselves. So how do we represent a tricky issue that are electricity and heat data sets? In terms of supply, we collect the fuel inputs to electricity and heat generations, so the quantity of coal or natural gas burnt to generate electricity. From this, we obtain the gross productions, and we subtract to that the own use by the electricity plant to obtain the net production. In addition to those various elements, one can extract from the production the pumped storage hydro. In some specific hydro plants, the water are pumped back to play the role of stocks of possible energy sources, and some more detailed elements that are not that present on the African continent, which are electric boilers and heat pumps. Then we have the trade, so import and export of electricity. They are specific in the case of specific rules in case of electricity. We will see them a little bit later. And also an important part, which are the losses in transmission and distributions of this electricity. This precise element can be high in case of old or badly maintained transmission and distribution systems, but also due to theft of electricity. At the end of the chain, for the demand, we would have the final consumption of electricity for residential, industries, etc. In addition to all those elements that will be in either physical units for the fuel inputs or in gigawatt hours, one can collect also the peak load and the capacity of this electric system, which are very good indicators to be used later on the development of the country. So firstly, let's look at sources of electricity to see how we distinguish the possible sources. Electricity is produced as both primary and secondary energy commodity. Primary electricity is obtained from natural sources such as hydro, solar photovoltaic, wind, tidal or wave energy, for example. Secondary sources are obtained from the heat generated by burning a combustible fuel. So either fossil fuel, coal, oil, gas, or etc., or also from nuclear fissions, from geothermal energy, and from solar thermal heat. So this is the first distinction that you can find in the dataset when we talk about primary electricity and secondary electricity. Now, also, some distinctions we can do in the electricity data are the type of producers. You can have main activity producers, which for whom the generations and of electricity or heat and the sale of this production to third party is their primary activity. So most of the time, those are plants like nuclear plants, thermal plants, natural gas, electricity plants, but for which the sole objective is to sell this electric or heat generated. And then we have the auto producers. Auto producers generate electricity and heat as a second or byproduct of their own activities. Let's say, for example, a windmill that will generate a little bit of electricity from its activity. It can sell this electricity to the grid without this being its main source of incomes. Now, another distinction in a type of plant would be the type of energy that is produced at the end of it. So you have electricity only, heat only, or combined heat and electricity, which is also referred as CHP, combined heat and power. Now that we have seen the distinctions we can do in the data, let's talk again about efficiencies. So if we insist on this in this presentation, it's because efficiencies are important to keep good track of your data sets and check the quality of your data set. And again, an efficiency is calculated by the output divided by the input in net using net calorific value for to work on energy units. And in energy units, it's always below 100%. The efficiency will differ by fuel or technologies. And once again, you must calculate your efficiency in energy unit every time you can. So, for example, an input of 100 units into a power plant would have an output of 20 units plus 45 units of 20 units of electricity plus 45 units of heat. And if you calculate the efficiency, considering it's all in the same unit, you have a 65% efficiency. The rest, the 45 units lost, are what we call the heat lost and are part of any transformations from one form of energy to another. So, just a reminder, use the same energy units everywhere. Hence the importance in energy balance, as you've seen in other presentations, of picking a correct energy unit. Now, let's go back a little bit when we were discussing about capacities. In addition to production, consumption, and trade data, we try also to capture in our data the power plant capacities, specifically the net maximum capacity. Net maximum capacity is simply the maximum power output that a power plant can produce with all plants running at full blast, and we consider for methodological reasons that we capture this on the 31st December of the reporting year. These are useful data for analysts to have. However, they can also be useful for statisticians when checking the data, as we can compare actual reported production value with the maximum potential production values to check if the data made sense. This value, actual production divided by potential production, is called the capacity factors. So, as you can see, capacity factor is actual production divided by capacity times the time of a year, in that case, or in any other time frame you are working here. Again, this value should always be less than 100%, except if there were plant closure near the end of the year, in which case the figure may be distorted. And there are different expected values depending on the technology. For instance, nuclear plants are expensive to build and therefore are typically run as much as possible, whereas solar PV, which does not run at night and is both weather and location dependent, will have a lower capacity factors. So as statistician, we can use both historical and expected capacity factor as a check in our data. Now, let's talk then on the concept between gross and net productions. Gross production refers to the total output of electricity or heat generated in the facility before any uses. However, not all of this is used for productive purpose beyond the power plants. Some of the electricity and heat generated is used on-site at the power plant for lighting, heating, and to support plant operations. This is referred to as on-use. The remainder that is left after subtracting the on-use is the net production. However, remember that for auto producers, productions only refer to the heat sold, heat or electricity sold to the grid, which bring to this kind of which brings us to a final check that you can do regarding the on-use, but we expect it should not vary too much over time and stay around 5%. So as I told you in the previous slide, you have also a value expected, which is transmission and distribution losses. So let's see a little bit more what's happening in the various part of those losses. As electricity travels through cables and transformers, energy is lost along the way. Much of this is in the form of heat, as the electric current flowing through the cable raises its temperature. This energy is lost as it dissipates into the surroundings, reducing the amount of energy that reaches the final destinations. In general, losses can be expected to be in the range about 5 to 15%. With losses on the lower end of the scale observed in more advanced, compact, and well-maintained grid, and higher losses observed in older or more distributed grid, and where there is a high rate of meter bypassing, in other words, theft of electricity. Now, let's see to finish on trade for electricity. As I told you, there are specific rules regarding trade of electricity. Unlike other fuels, trade of electricity and heat are more difficult to understand because they are not physical units that you can move by yourself. It's a flow of electrons through a cable. So how do you report this? Well, you report it as a flow, actually, like a flow going through borders of a country. And in that case, we do not focus on the origin and destinations of those electrons. Let's take an example to see it a little bit more clearly. Here we have 3 countries, Togo, Benin, and Nigeria. So let's imagine that Togo is importing electricity from Nigeria through the network of Benin. Those 3 countries would have to report the flows as it follows. Nigeria would report exportations toward Benin. Benin would report some importations from Nigeria and the same value exported towards Togo. And Togo would report the importation from Benin. So here, for electricity, this is the only part where in our methodology we report the transit of flows. Now we will briefly discuss on the possible electricity data sources for your data collections. So very briefly, we already discussed about this before. You can use surveys toward power producers, toward enterprise, households, or market or operators to collect from them on a regular basis data on value of production or consumptions. You can use administrative data from energy regulators, customs office for the trades, and data collecting from program policy implementations to check the efficiency of specific policies. You can use direct measurements, so using conventional or smart meters to directly measure on a building or on a specific place the consumption on regular points. And finally, you can use estimation and modeling, for example, using the plant capacity informations to estimate generations of specific sources. With this, we reach the end of these presentations. So the IEA have a lot of resources available online. So some free products such as the Keyword Energy Statistics, Data and Statistics Browser, and Energy Atlas manuals on energy statistics methodologies. And we have also a lot of various energy data on specific flows, on CO2 emissions, and or energy price.
So now I hope that you enjoyed this second part on renewables and electricity. We received already a few questions in the question and answer box, which Nicola has been replying to. There's just one pending, Nicola, on auto producers.
Yes, we just received it right now. So thank you very much for this. So given the variety of auto producers of electricity using different generators set in Nigeria, how could you compute the fuel petrol consumptions in auto production of electricity? And how could you measure the quantity of electricity generated from auto production in the whole country or region? Auto producers are always the most difficult part regarding electricity generation because they can be invisible for many for many regions in the data sets. What is the best approach? I think is to try to make sure that any sales of electricity to the grid or to a mini grid, if it's a separate grid from the main structure of the country, needs to be reported by the sellers, maybe through taxes or through some other administrative elements, so that you can collect this. In some countries, there's still taxes on value added or this kind of element that can be applied to those sales, and you could use that to at least collect the legal part of it. Knowing that also in some countries, I don't know exactly how the rules are stated in Nigeria, but in some countries also companies can get taxes deduction actually from selling electricity to the grid. Not taxes, but all reduction of their own electricity bills if they are selling back electricity toward the grid, mostly regarding solar panel, for example, in France. So that would be my suggestion. But how can you compute the electricity generated from this? And then, if you have the names and the list of generators of sellers of those fuels, then you can reach out to them to collect at least information on what they produce. Keeping in mind that they might, in that case, report the whole input to power plants, to the auto producers, the whole input, including what they consume for themselves. Remember that when we are talking about auto producer, we are only talking about the electricity generated that is sold.
Yeah, and not what they consume for their own activity.
Exactly. So that's where
the amount of fuel that is consumed to produce steel, for example, that should not be reported as input to the auto producer electricity plants. So
that would be in
it's quite tricky to report auto producers. So sometimes some plants they make estimates instead. So they back calculate the input based on the amount that they are selling, and they try to estimate how much input they consume.
Which is why also we often get efficiencies that are either lower than usual or higher than usual because of these difficulties regarding the producer. So on our own check, for example, the level of acceptations is higher for auto producers than for main activity producers, because there's always this question of what is actually used internally for just for the plant, for the structure, and what is sold actually to the grid.
Yeah, exactly. Can you
assume the loss incurred in the transmission of electricity to be energy needed for transmission? I think I understand your question. Can you assume the loss incurred in the transmission of it? But there are two different things here. So first, there are the losses in transmission and distribution. So those in a perfect world should be only the amount of heat that is emitted by the cables or the transformators or along the way from the electricity generators towards the consumer. So this is what should be in the losses, T&D losses for electricity. And then there is the energy needs for transmissions. So the amount of power you need to for the structure, to maintenance, that should be reported under the energy industry on use.
Yeah.
So those are two separate flows normally.
Yeah, in transmission and distribution losses, it's really the amount that is lost during transmission. Theft as well is reported there. So
basically, it will be the difference between what is the raw value outside that is sent from the plant to the grid compared to what is the total consumed electricity in if you sum all the demand from all the residential industries and all. So that this should be the difference between both. Then again, there is always theft on the grid. So we add to those technical losses, the theft in the
yeah, people that just connect themselves to the lines. I think it was in Venezuela that I think it was like 50% was lost.
In countries where you have civil unrest or wars, there is always a very high peak suddenly of this, which do not help at all the the grid to stay stable. And South Africa right now also has a lot of issues because of the various civil unrest that happened in the last years, and it's the whole grid is already having a lot of issues.
Thank you. So now I think we can move on to the correction of the exercise. I hope that you have been able to. Okay, so I think Nicola, I have the same issue where I can't share anymore. Can you open the file for me?
Give me just a moment.
Yeah, sure. It's in the Nigeria folder. I'm sorry about this. I have some technical issues today. Thank you. So let me see. So here we have you have been asked to study the efficiency of electricity generation in country A from natural gas. So you have a table with the natural gas statistics. So you have the supply, you have the statistical difference, the amount of natural gas that is consumed in electricity plants to produce electricity, but also some final consumption data for industry, residential, etc. So you have your supply and your demand. And the first question was, using the gross calorific value for natural gas production and imports, calculate the weighted average gross calorific value for production and imports from 2013 to 2019. So in the green table on your left side, you can see that you have the calorific value for production. And then you have also the calorific values for imports, and you have to calculate the weighted average for 2013 to 2019. And here, the way you calculate it, it's the formula that we have been talking about. It's you take your amount of production, the quantity of production up, and you multiply it by your calorific value. So 9 for 2013, it's 9 times 38 plus your import, so 150 plus times 41.5, and you divide it by the sum of the quantity up, so production plus imports. So if you show the formula, Nicola, yeah, so you do a sum product of 9 times 38 plus 150 times 41.5, you divide by the sum of your production and imports, and that gives you the weighted average calorific value for 2013. You apply the same formula up to 2019, and you have your weighted average gross calorific values. So here we see that if we look a bit more at what it means, the weighted calorific value, you see that for 2013, it's closer to the imports value than to the production value. And that's because your quantity of imports is much, much higher than your production. So it's normal that your weighted average, it's more weighted towards your imports. But if you look at 2019, where you have more or less the same amount of production and imports, so you see that your weighted average value, it's in between 38 and 40. So that was the first question. The second question was, can you identify, so it's still in the first question, is can you identify something wrong with production gross calorific value? Do you see any way of correcting this? So let's look at the production calorific values, and you see that it's 38 all the years. So this is weird because normally calorific values, they vary over time. And this could be due to several reasons. So this could be due to the source of data that is using the default calorific value when reporting to the statistical offices. This could be solved by first discussing with the producer company to know if they can provide you with more information on this, if they can develop a survey to collect such information, or if you can if the government can make a mandate to make the producing companies to publish that information. So it's very important to really make sure that data counterparts share that information, the calorific values information, in addition to the production or consumption quantities. So that was the first question. The second one is now using the gross here, yeah. So using the gross calorific values for natural gas, calculate the natural gas balance in terajoule gross calorific value and fill all the cells, the yellow cells here. So here it's very simple. Up you have your data in cubic meters, in million cubic meters in the first table. So if you go up, yes. So here you have your data in cubic meters, you have your calorific values, so you can easily calculate your data in terajoule by taking each of them and you multiply it by the corresponding calorific value. So if you go down a bit, Nicola, so if we go here, so for production, we have specific calorific values. So you use those calorific values for imports as well. But for the others where you don't have specific calorific values, you use the weighted average calorific value for electricity, for industry and all. You will apply you take the quantity in million cubic meters, you multiply it by the weighted calorific value for all the flows except production and imports. So that was the second question. The third one is now using the calculated balance, so this new balance that we calculated, calculate a verification indicator for statistical difference. So you have the amount of statistical difference and you want to make a check on that. So what would you check? So usually the check that we do is that we take the statistical difference and we calculate it as a share of the total supply. And here you can see that in 2015, there's an issue here. And because it's too high, it's usually statistical difference is should be less than 5%, around 5%. So this is acceptable when we check the energy balances, more or less. But here in this case, it's minus 55, and it gives you an indication that one of the component in the energy balance is not reported in a proper way. So it could be either in supply or in demand, something must be misreported. So now if we go to question 5, it says, using the natural gas and the electricity generation data as well as the conversion factors in B64. So here you see we have the electricity output in gigawatt hour, and then we have conversion factors to convert from gigawatt to terajoule or terajoule to gigawatt. So here it says, calculate the electricity generation efficiency for natural gas. So here it's the yellow cells here. So how do we calculate that? Efficiency, it's output divided by input. So here you will take your amount of natural gas production. So for 2010, it's 285. Yeah, for 2013, it's 454. And you will divide it by your natural gas input, which is up in the table. So here, in this case, you will take what is in the row 34. And but the thing is that when you calculate efficiency, it has to be in the same unit. So here you would convert your input, which is in terajoule, you convert it to gigawatt hour. So you divide by 3.6 and you would get your percentage, your efficiency. Again, here we see that in 2015, the efficiency is very low. And this continues. You see, first we saw in statistical difference, there was an issue. And here we see that there's also a problem in the efficiency of the natural gas electricity plants. So here the question 6 was, do you notice issues with any of the calculated efficiencies? So yes, we see in 2015, it's suspiciously low compared to expected ranges, but also to the historical figures. And what could be wrong here? So here, two possibilities. Either the input is wrong or the output is wrong. So let's look again at the numbers. We see that, yeah, you see that there's a peak here. So if we go, wait, let me look at the number. So we see, if we look at electricity output in row 56, you see that the generation looks okay. It's 482. But if we look at the input of natural gas, so if we go to 34, we see that it's 4,619, which is very high here. So 2015, it's very high. So this gives you a hint that most probably it's this natural gas input to electricity plants that's wrong. So if we go back to the question, try to correct the wrongly reported figure in the statistics. So here we need to fix that balance. How would you fix that? So the easiest way is to change that calorific value and estimate it. So an easy way to estimate it is to make like an average of the 2 years before and after. So you make an average of 2014 and 2016, and that because 2014 it's 35%, 2016 it's 35%. So if we change the calorific value for 2015 to be 35% as well, which is the average of the period before and after, then we can back calculate that input which we said was wrong, right? So if we go then back to row H34, so this number would be H56. So you would take your output, so H56, so you would take 482, you would divide it, and you would apply the 35% efficiency to back calculate your input. So Nicola, if you go up here, yes, so put here equal to, so equal to H56 divide by bracket 35%. So here we will apply 35% and we divide it by D65. So D65, it's the, yeah, you can by the conversion, yes. So normally you would get 4,950 exactly. So that's now the right input that we back calculate, and if you look at the statistical difference, now it's fixed, it's -2%. So indeed, it was the natural gas input that was creating an imbalance between the demand and the supply, and that error here led to the efficiency being wrong as well. And yes, so that was the end of this exercise. Let me know if you need.
In this situation, of course, you should also reach out to your data providers,
yes,
or mostly in that case, the power plant, to understand why this mistake occurs. Maybe they just reporting in a different unit, or maybe they
reported two things twice. Yeah, exactly.
They included some losses that should not have been there. There might be a lot of, but it's always good to know where these kind of issues come from, so that you can anticipate if this might occur in the future or not.
So that was on the exercise. I hope that I was not too fast, but let me know. Anyway, I really recommend you to work on them, to redo it by yourself. If you want, you can also send it to me by email for correction, or if there's a specific thing that you can't do alone and you want more explanation, we can exchange by email. I will be very happy to correct your exercise for you. We have been doing it for other countries as well, and they send it to me by email, and I do the correction without any problem.
I think we had one last question, maybe, before we close the session. So one of the attendees asked, how can we reduce the transmission and distribution losses significantly in Africa? Well, it's really a matter of
maintenance of the grids, of the lines, yeah.
Maintenance of the grid, building new lines up to the current standard, because many grids also on the continent in general are very old and dates back from sometimes still some colonial parts. So that's really like
Upgrading the
old,
the lines.
should
Yeah.
be replaced. And also working with the population in general to make sure that the lines are not degraded, because theft, it's always stealing part of the electricity production from and the taxes and all, but it also has an impact in terms of technicity to the grid. It will have like effect on the how the grid grew old and how well it will behave after that,
It's
because
also a safety question. Sometimes people, they just put together lines on the how do you say, column? Yeah, and so yeah, educating the population on the importance of maintaining.
And there are a lot of projects right now in Africa working on some mini grid concept around one power generator. So it could be fossil fuel or renewables, but just around one generator, to, instead of have a big national grid to maintain, to have smaller units that can be maintained on a more local scale. That is also something that is investigated right now on the continent to see if this could be used.
Yeah.
And yes, so maybe to add, so more effective metering, disintegration of distribution for easier monitoring. You could cut the grass under my feet right now. And yes, indeed, also the metering to, this is in general, not only to reduce transmission distribution, but also to help on the correct generations and distributions, to know where you would need more power than else, really effective metering to know who is consuming what and what could be done to help us on this would be, of course, pretty important.
Yeah. If we don't have any question, I think we can close now. And thank you very much, everyone, for staying throughout the 2-hour course. I hope that you have learned something from us, and thank you very much for all the questions as well. It's very interesting for us to exchange with you and to learn from you as well on things that we are not so knowledgeable. But I hope that we have been able to at least teach you something on the different commodity statistics. And tomorrow there's no training because it's a public holiday in France. And but on Thursday we will meet again, same time. And on Thursday we will look at energy balances. So how do we move from energy statistics in different energy units to the energy balances? So and we will also look at how do we use the energy balances to calculate CO2 emissions. So it will be very interesting. I hope to see you all on Thursday, same time. Thank you very much. And again, for the exercise, if you have questions, drop me an email. Thank you. Bye.
Goodbye.